Joining me now is NBC's Casey Hunt and the Huffington Post's Sam Stein. Good to have you both here. Casey, I'll start with you. What struck you most about this news?
This is just going to be the beginning, but is possibly one of the worst things that could come back to haunt Hillary Clinton from the 1990s. I mean, this is, something that the country went through over the course of many years.
Even with the narrative that she presents about Bill Clinton being fairly positive, she says at one point, yes, my boss did take advantage of me, but this was a consensual relationship, and the worst trauma came from the reaction on the Hill.
Absolutely. And the other thing that she discusses that I thought was interesting was this idea that Hillary Clinton was blaming the women that were involved, blaming Monica Lewinsky and blaming herself for what happened. And as somebody who's, setting up a potential bid to be the first female president, I mean, that's striking.
Sam, how do you think Republicans are going to react to this?
Well, call me idealistic, call me naive. I think that Republicans will generally avoid this. I feel like there's a general fatigue around this issue.
Wow, optimism from Sam Stein. I've never heard anything like it.
It's Tuesday. Wait till the end of the week and I'll get pessimistic. But it's 20 years ago. Well, not 20 years ago. It's 15 years ago. And I think people are just sort of fatigued by the whole thing and don't really want to relive all of that drama. I just think that it's a noble thing that she's doing, trying to help people who are victims of internet harassment, who are suicidal like she was. I think we'll see her do things like that and applaud them, and I think we'll try to avoid, hopefully as a society, as a media culture, as a political culture, we'll try to avoid the tawdry aspects of what happened 15 years ago.
I have to hope that. I don't have a lot of hope based on personal experience with that. I do think, not to make light of Monica's trauma on this, but we were all slightly traumatized by living through that. Casey, in terms of the actual practical implications of this, the Clintons are riding high in the polls right now. You said it was the worst nightmare Hillary Clinton could face right now. Do you think it'll hit their poll numbers?
Well, I think that, Secretary Clinton came out of her tenure as Secretary of State with extraordinarily high approval ratings, but and after the Lewinsky affair, she actually had very high approval ratings then as well. Then she went to run for office, and those poll numbers plummeted, and she again faced sort of the same round of attacks. I mean, I think there's no question that they are enjoying sort of a period of riding high, but once this election fully engages, I mean, those poll numbers are going to go back toward the earth, Lewinsky or not.
All right, well, we'll see. A lot of Democrats are obviously focused on the general election, but of course it is primary day, so I want to switch gears to that. Sam, let's talk about North Carolina. There are a lot of eyes on that race. There's a tension, obviously, between an establishment candidate and a Tea Partier coming up. What do you think that's going to shake out like, and why are so many people focused on that particular race? Well,
the reason there's so much tension on this race is because it's one of the first indications of this resurgent, mainstream, establishment Republican push to get candidates nominated as their general election candidates. And so Tom Tillis has gotten a host of financial backing from outside groups that are there primarily to avoid the missteps of Tea Party past. And so what he needs to do tonight is break the 40% threshold. The 40% threshold is important because if you get above that, you don't have to go to a runoff with your next closest competitor. He'll likely win the nomination either way, but if he avoids a runoff, he saves a lot of money and about 2 months of additional campaigning, and instead he can focus on Senator Kay Hagan instead.
I guess we'll see if that turns out to be a bellwether. Casey, there's also, of course, a congressional race happening in North Carolina right now. Former American Idol Clay Aiken is in that race as a Democrat. Huge, big deal. He was on the program. He actually recently told me when he was on that his opponent was giving a run for his money, that there was a fundraising differential here. Take a listen.
His ability to self-fund his campaign, to me, it's an example of someone who's trying to buy a seat. And we see a lot of that on one side of the aisle. We're unfortunately seeing it on our side of the aisle, too.
Casey, what do you expect the outcome on that to be?
Look, I mean, you can either...
bloodbath, right? Shall we be frank?
A little bit, yes. Wait, yes. Shall we be frank? Something of a bloodbath. And, look... What's worse, buying a seat or expecting that as somebody who's won millions of votes on American Idol, you can sort of coast into a congressional seat? I mean, it's to a certain extent, I just don't see necessarily any reason for this to be at the top of anyone's radar screens other than for that reason.
That's putting it nicely, Casey.
Trying to be polite.
And with all the talk about the difficulty Dems have in turning out voters for midterms, Do you think that we're going to see more Democratic money pour into some of these state races?
I think you're already seeing that. And we were just talking about the Senate race in North Carolina. And one of the reasons why Tom Tillis might see his number fall below 40% and we might see a bloody runoff is because Democrats have been up on the air hitting him. They claim that they're not meddling in the primary, but they definitely would prefer to see this drag out as long as possible or to see somebody other than Tom Tillis win this nomination. But I'll also say that the establishment Republicans have a lot of skin in this game. The Chamber of Commerce and Karl Rove's group, Crossroads, they're both up in the air with, million-plus dollar buys in the final weeks of this race. And, that's reflective of how much North Carolina really is a bellwether.
The battle for the Republican Party's soul going on here.
It is.
And on the Democratic side, Sam, do you think you're going to see bigger and bigger ad buys from Dems?
It's tough. You talk to groups, and they're still trying to figure out how to best spend their money. Obviously, Senate races are important. Political super PACs are popping up to support these candidates. But there's also a subculture in the Democratic community that says we need to start looking even further down ballot. People who know that state legislature races are important, gubernatorial races, even races for judgeships. They all require money. And in the super PAC era, you can have one super PAC pop up and totally recast a judgeship race that is totally obscure but has an immense effect on the community at large. So Democrats are still trying to figure out how to position themselves in this post-Citizens United world, and I don't think they've come to a concrete game plan just yet.
And it really is, as you say, a super PAC era, more and more money flowing into these races. We're going to look at that in a second, but for now, thank you, Casey and Sam. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Ronan.